Welcome into Hoosier Gameday. It's week 4. Indiana is still perfect. They're heading onto the road now to the Cincinnati Bearcats. I'm Jack Edwards alongside Callie Metzger as always. Callie, this is show number 4. If I had told you in that first show that Indiana, as they begin to go onto the road, they're undefeated 3-0, would you have believed me?
No, and I'm pretty sure at one of our first shows, we saw a hype video of IU football, and I was like, that's as hype as they're going to get. And I'm positively quite surprised that they are 3-0 on the season, but good for them.
Good for them, 3-0. They've been 3 wins that I think in a lot of manners have not been pretty, but they're 3 wins. You'd rather have 3 ugly wins than 3 pretty defeats, obviously.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I think touching upon that too, those wins have come from the second half of the game.
Yes.
So I think that also contributes to the ugly part of those wins, but
Very interesting to see how that translates going forward. Cincinnati, probably Indiana's best opponent so far. They're playing them this week on the road in Cincinnati. But before we kind of look forward, let's look back. And the hero from Indiana's win over Western Kentucky, from Carlo Barone.
Trust. One of the most important qualities that a coach must have with his team, and more importantly, his kicker. Fortunately for Tom Allen, this bond has never been stronger.
Be at your best when it counts the most. That's one of our DNAs for special teams. And he is his best. He kicked, was it 4 field goals today? Is that right? He kicked 4 field goals. He kicked 3? Okay. So he kicked 3 field goals, and obviously the last one was the biggest one. And so that's what I remember about that kick. The bottom line was that he responded in a situation where, it's hard. He's a good kicker, but there's a lot of pressure.
Needing a score late, the team is all too familiar with the scenario. With a touchdown to Cam Camper and a successful 2-point conversion, the Hoosiers played for overtime. And in the heat of this big moment, the team stuck to its roots.
Just LEO. I mean, everyone fighting through adversity. It didn't look good when we were down. What were we down? 5, and they were about to score. And then our defense did a heck of a job holding to a field goal, and I just took it one play at a time on that last drive and found guys open.
I'm here at the 41-yard line, the exact point where Charles Campbell nailed a 51-yard field goal that ended today's contest. And after being carried away by his teammates in front of the student section, the only thing going through Campbell's mind, pure emotion.
No, I'm just thankful I made it. I'm just really excited, really happy, and I was really appreciative of all the fans who stayed through the whole game. There was times where it didn't look good for us, but we found a way to win. We kept pushing.
The constant back and forth revealed the toughness and resiliency of this team to get where they are now, 3-0. For the Hoosier Network, I've been Carlo Barone.
Well, great coverage from Carlo Barone, as always, on last week's matchup. I'm joined now by Riley Woodall of IUSTV Sports. Riley, I'm glad that you're here. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, man. I'm doing phenomenal. I'm a little tired. It's a Friday. I had a discussion earlier, but it's all right. We're doing good now. We're doing good now.
I'm impressed. We film these at 10 a.m. on Fridays for reference point. I'm impressed that you had a class earlier today.
Yeah, we're here.
So were you in the student class?
Say what?
Were you wearing the student class?
Yes. Yes, it was.
Were you getting some odd looks? Like, why is that guy wearing a suit?
Yeah, I got a lot of Kelly looks. If you know what what I'm talking about. Yeah.
It's always the risk when you're walking on campus. No disrespect to our friends who are in the Kelly School of Business, but you feel like, all right.
When you see a suit, you assume.
Yeah. We need to take control of that back.
Exactly.
The media school students as a collective. Let's get away from the suit discussion into some football discussion. Indiana versus Cincinnati. Last year's matchup was a very intriguing one. It came down, and I think a lot of people's retrospective view of the game comes down to a big play, Micah McFadden being ejected for targeting.
Right.
Walking through last year's matchup, was that the pivotal moment in that game?
I think it has to be the pivotal moment, even if you look at some other things. Maybe there was a fumble on the goal line in the third, fourth quarter, somewhere in there. But Micah McFadden getting ejected for that targeting call really changed the entire dynamic of the game. The Cincinnati offense was able to get so much more momentum that way because McFadden was such a big impact and personality on that Indiana defense last year. And I think really that's what flipped it around. The offense of IU still had chances in that game to score. And turnover on the goal line, interception, everything in between. That's why football is a two-sides game there, special teams too. So I think even though McFadden did get ejected, the offense had chances, and they just kind of fell away, and the air just kind of like left the stadium, I think, after McFadden left.
And it was almost a microcosm of the season as a whole. Opportunities not taken, things not going their way. You could use that with the injuries that happened last year. On the Cincinnati side of things, comparing them to last year, this year, major departures, changes from last year's group that went all the way to the college football playoff compared to this year's group.
Right. Well, I think we got to address the elephant in the room. 9 draft picks taken in this year's NFL draft or this past year's NFL draft, however you look at it. Biggest in school history. That's the most in school history that they've had. The biggest 5 that they lost: Sauce Gardner, cornerback on the defensive side; Alec Pierce; Desmond Ritter, the former QB. I believe Brian Cook, I believe, something like that.
I believe you.
Yeah, I believe you. Thank you. And then, of course, Myjai Sanders. That's the guy, that the big D end that they lost as well. This is a defense that is very, very depleted in comparison to last year. They can make big plays, but their turnover margin, I believe, is way less than what we've seen from last year. You talk about the quarterback position, Ben Bryant coming in place of Desmond Ritter. He's doing pretty well. He's almost 900 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. He's got some weapons with him. But, again, this is a Cincinnati team that I believe is in a rebuilding year more than compared to last year with the big team that they had. This is not a defense that is going to be all over offenses like we've seen last year. So I really think that's the biggest difference from last year to this year.
And another big difference is the venue, going from Bloomington now back to Cincinnati. How big an impact is that going to play on either side of the ball and either team's play now that it's a change of venue?
Right, and I think we have to talk about, too, this is Indiana's first away game of the season. And we also got to talk about Cincinnati is 28-0 at home games. That's like one of the longest streaks, active streaks of any team. And this is an Indiana team that struggled on the road a lot last year. And it's hard to play on the road in college sports in general. But I think it's going to be an interesting environment. It's going to be interesting to see how IU responds to a more, I guess, not more aggressive or a more less better environment.
Yeah.
They're not going to have the home crowd with them this time. They're going to be working against the crowd. So I'm going to be interested to see how they respond to that. But I think Cincinnati has a much bigger momentum playing this game at home this year.
Well, it remains to be seen how they will respond to that environment. Before we get some predictions, see what we think is actually going to happen, let's again look back a bit at last week. Some more from Max Parker and Evan Gerike after the win over Western Kentucky.
Max Parker alongside Evan Gerike for the Hoosier Network down here on the field after another just crazy ending. This time it went into overtime. Illinois didn't quite get there, but, I mean, they have really taken it down to the wire all season so far.
Yeah, I mean, all game today, it felt like Indiana was at the verge of dropping out of this one, and they kept finding ways to come back, and the end of the game was just crazy. There's the game-tying 8-point score with the 2-point conversion. Then you've got the missed field goal at the end of regulation. Then you've got a blocked field goal in overtime, and then Charles Campbell hits the massive game winner to put Indiana at 3-0.
Yeah, and, I mean, again, that's kind of the theme hearing from this team is they got there. It wasn't pretty, but they're 3-0. What does this team need to change before next week, again, facing off against Cincinnati, this time on their home field?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure every single player we talked to, along with Coach Allen, said that they need to be better next week, that they haven't played their best football yet. And that's definitely clear just from watching this team play. But does it matter that much when you're 3-0? I mean, every time you can come out here and get a win is huge. But there are things this team needs to fix. The defense needs to solidify up, especially in the run game. The offensive line always needs to be better and to allow the run game to open up a little bit more. They had 120 yards rushing. Allen mentioned that 150 is kind of their target goal. Bazelak threw the ball very well. A lot of missed passes, though, a few drops. A lot of just small things to clean up to kind of move forward as we go on in the season.
Yeah, I think you said it best, though, when you said at the end of the day, 3-0, that's what shows up on the record sheet at the end of the year. So they need to fix some things before next week if they want to face off against Cincinnati and come away with the W. But until then, I've been Max Parker alongside Evan Gerike, and we will see you next week.
This is a great analysis from Max Parker and Evan. And Evan is here in studio with us. How you doing, Evan?
I'm doing good. I'm good. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, we're talking Indiana side of things today. And I think the question that everyone's kind of asking, Jack and I touched on it earlier in the show. We're 3-0. It's 3 ugly wins, but they're 3 wins. How did we get there?
Well, it's a lot of people stepping up in the right moment. Connor Bazelak is obviously a huge one who came through in pretty much all 3 games late when they're in the second half and they're trailing. It's really come through with control of the offense to lead this team. But there's also a lot of guys who maybe go under the radar a little bit that have been huge in helping this team get there. Miles Jackson, who intercepted Western Kentucky in the end zone, set Indiana up to go on a 9-play, 90-yard touchdown drive that really swung the momentum of the game. It felt like it brought Indiana back and helped them kind of get to the point where they tied it and could win in overtime. Caleb Murphy, same last week. He played every snap at center. He had never started a game before. He found out he was starting just minutes before the game started when Zach Carpenter went down with a hand injury. And he played very well for someone who kind of out of nowhere had to be thrust in a very important position. And there's just been a lot of guys all season who have stepped up in those moments, like those two, that have allowed Indiana to kind of come through and be 3-0 at this point.
Well, speaking of guys who have stepped up, let's talk more about Charles Campbell. I mean, what do you have to say about him, his future with this team? Is this his redemption tour?
Well, I mean, that kick last week was just huge. Right. Obviously, he told us after the game, as soon as it left his foot, he knew it was good, which says a lot when you're kicking from 51 yards that you're that confident in your ability. Yeah. But it was a great kick. It obviously had plenty of distance. It was right on target. And as soon as he made that kick, he was ready to run towards the student section to celebrate. After last week, when he struggled kicking, he missed 2 against Idaho, not his best game by far, and he went into practice and he kind of took that mentality, and Charles Campbell's a great guy to talk to. He is really introspective about the headspace that he'll be in and how he works when he makes mistakes. And he talked to us about how last week he was like, okay, I need to practice like I play. I need to go out and practice and kick these field goals like I would in the game. And whatever he did, whatever Tom Allen talked to him about, it worked, obviously, because that kick was huge. And really, that's what won Indiana the football game.
Do you think, one last thing, and then we're going to go into some predictions. You mentioned in your analysis some kind of things that IU needs to do, what they need to do to step up to be contenders for this game this weekend. I've been wondering, is the game on the road going to be kind of an impact to, how they perform? Being 3 wins at home in Bloomington, being in Cincinnati this weekend, is that going to kind of impact things?
Yeah, this is the first time they've been on the road, obviously. They've had 3 games all at home in Bloomington Memorial Stadium. Traveling on the road is going to mix things up a little bit. Last year we saw in the first game they went to Iowa, and they weren't really ready for that environment. Right. And Cincinnati's got a good environment too, obviously a team that's been playing really well for the last few years now. They went to the college football playoff last year. So going into that environment, they're really going to have to learn how to play without a crowd behind them. Mm-hmm. So we'll learn some things about how this team does when the pressure's on and people are yelling at them, and Connor Bazelak's got that crowd kind of crowding him. I'm not really worried about his ability to handle that pressure. It feels like Connor Bazelak is always a level guy. Mm-hmm. I feel like every time we've talked to him, he's had the exact same amount of emotion, whether or not they just won or he's came off of practice. I mean, the guy is very steady, but obviously when you're going on the road, you've got to kind of take a different approach into how you're preparing for the game. So how Indiana has done that for Cincinnati is going to be interesting to watch.
Well, it will be interesting to watch, and we're going to talk about some predictions. So, Evan, we'll start with you. What is your prediction for this weekend, IU versus Cincinnati?
I'm not feeling too confident this week. Cincinnati obviously has had a really good few years, and after last year when they almost got beat in Bloomington, obviously they came back late and won that game. Now Indiana's got to go on the road, and after what we've seen the first 3 weeks, I'm just not sure I'm confident that this team can keep themselves close enough in the first half to dig out of a hole in the second half. I'm going to say 38-28 Cincinnati. So they'll beat the spread. They're gonna hit the under, but I'm not feeling too confident about the win for Indiana.
Well, I'm going to make mine short and sweet, and mine's going to be similar to yours. I'm taking Cincinnati for the win, but I'm going to do 38-20. All right. So we'll see. All right, let's hear from Jack and Riley on their predictions for this weekend's matchup.
Yeah, thanks, Callie. So we have 2 Cincinnati wins predicted by the other half of our show. Jack Edwards, Riley Woodall back here. Riley, I'll just go right to you. What's your prediction for the game?
Well, their predictions were a little bit higher on the score range, I think. So I'm going to go with something a little bit different. I'm going to go 28-25 Cincy. And the reason being is because I am an optimist. I like to think of myself as an optimist, like, oh, you can hang in there with them. Cincinnati is one of the losses I have Indiana taking this year. I'm a 9-win Indiana guy, just to let you know. But I think Cincinnati beats them on a last-second field goal to win the game at home and make it 29-0.
So that would be a very dramatic winner for Cincinnati. It'd be an interesting way for that one to wrap up. So we've got 3 Cincinnati predictions. I'd be remiss if I didn't go with Indiana. We just got the contrarian in the room. I've gone with Indiana wins 3 weeks in a row, and I've said that this is. I've been right 3 times,
right,
Riley. I'm
so why
3-0.
stop?
Why stop now? I think it is going to be one of the ugliest games that you will ever see. It is not going to come in with like any sort of high scoring. I agree with you on that. I'm going to go 17-13. Just one of the ugliest games that you will ever see.
Wow.
Indiana takes that one in dramatic fashion as well, but it will be a defensive slugfest, and I think that's something that Indiana will enjoy. Tom Allen will get in there and say he's going to get into the nitty-gritties. They're going to try and fight for it. I think this is going to be a 4th ugly win in a row, and the questions will still persist. But 4 ugly wins, again, we said at the beginning of the show, 4 ugly wins are certainly better than 4 pretty losses.
Right, and it's still 4-0.
It's still 4-0.
Still 4-0.
It remains to be seen what actually happens. I'm fascinated to see with how this match plays out. But that does it for Hoosier Game Day for this week. For Callie, Metzger, Gerike, I've been Jack Edwards alongside Riley Woodall. Make sure to follow us all season long. We'll catch you next week.